At what point you decided to go into comedy, given it's not the most traditional Asian profession? Do you want to start, Anil?
Well, I'm not the most traditional Asian, so that's... I got a job through, I can't remember how, as a runner on a show called Spitting Image, which used to be around a long time ago.
I think everyone over the age of 30 will know what that is. No
okay. Yeah, and I was working on that, and then I thought, I used to give the producers tea, and I thought I'll write some sketches, and gave him the sketches with his tea, and he's used a couple and said they were all right. I thought, oh, well, maybe I could do this. So the rest is history.
And a glittering career was launched. What about you, Saurabh?
I started to, I got into comedy as a profession because I used to design chemical plants, and they smell, and they're really horrible. And I took a job. I answered an ad in the paper to produce live comedy, which I'd done bits of at university and really loved the comedy scene. But I got an engineering degree. I was going to be an engineer, but chemical plants are revolting places. So I answered the ad and then got stuck in this profession. I've been here ever since. I've tried to escape many times, but I'm qualified for nothing else.
So I taught in Tower Hamlets, and I hated it, and it was boring and all that. And I was really interested in writing comedy, so I went and did this writing course at the City Lit, which was about writing comedy. It wasn't about performing, but I didn't know this, but at the end of the course, we had to perform what we'd written. And the teacher had told us to write about the truth. She never told us to be funny. She just said, I want you to write about something that you really hate about yourself that's really truthful. And I thought nobody was going to see the material and we weren't going to perform it. And I wrote about how I had loads of facial hair and I had a moustache and how it was ruining my life and how I tried bleaching it and shaving it and plucking it and lasering it and threading it. And I really hated it, and I talked about how it had, taken over my life. And
was this funny?
No, it wasn't meant to be. Well, it wasn't meant to be because she just said, talk about something you really hate that's personal to you.
Yeah.
And in my class, in my writing class, it was full of bankers, lawyers, doctors who had harboured this secret desire to do comedy, and they were all on this evening course. And at the end of the lesson, she made us all stand up and talk about this thing that we hated. And I thought, oh my God, I've got to tell everybody about my moustache. And it was really weird because then I stood up and everybody started laughing. And it wasn't meant to be funny, it was just meant to be personal.
Did you have the moustache when you were talking about it?
Do you know, I had half of one because I had been trying to get rid of it, you see. And I stood up and everybody started laughing and the teacher said, oh, this is really funny, you should go out on the circuit and start performing it. And I'd never heard of the circuit. I'd never been to a comedy club in my life. And as a group, we went out every night on the circuit, which was just small rooms above pubs. And we'd do that 5 minutes of that thing that we hated. And every time I went out and talked about my moustache, everybody would start laughing. And I really loved that feeling of people laughing. And then it was like an addiction. It was like a drug, this laughter that, oh, I really like the feeling of it. And then I just carried on, and I never thought I would be a comedian, but it sort of happened by accident then.
Well, great story. To talk more generally about British Asian comedy, I guess Goodness Gracious Me was the big moment, right? But do you guys remember what British Asian comedy was like before that? Saurabh?
Well, there wasn't any really, was there?
There's Mind Your Language.
Well, there was Mind Your Language.
There was The Real McCoy.
Which was Anil as well.
All right.
He's the godfather of everything. There wasn't really any at all, and I think...
But the Asian accent was intrinsically funny, meant to be, right?
But you have to just decide what you mean by British Asian comedy, don't you? So, I mean, there were Asian characters in some comedy shows before, but most of them were shows written or created by English or British people, as opposed to British Asian people. And therefore they were, if you like, second-hand interpretations.
So what did people do? Because I remember watching a lot of Lenny Henry, because that was the closest I got. That was to my experience, because he was from Dudley Was there anything that you guys watched?
I watched. I watched the Good Life. Fan of comedy. I just like comedy. Well, I didn't really differentiate what was. I didn't say, well, I'm only going to watch stuff that's about me, because it would have been quite limiting. It would have been just people who were half Indian and half English and brought up. You know, it's.
So you're about to say.
I always watch like Larry Grayson, John Inman, Kenny Everett, all the gay ones. I mean, I was always attracted to the gay male comedian. I always thought that that was really funny. And it's weird then, because when I started stand-up, my audience was mainly gay men. But I never thought of myself as Asian.
So I guess Goodness Gracious Me was the thing, in my opinion. But maybe you guys disagree. Be as honest as you like. How do you guys feel about Goodness Gracious Me now? You're going to come last, given that you made it. Do you remember watching it? I mean, do you remember the experience?
I do, very, very clearly. And it did two things for me. The first was I was very conscious of... I had a lot of Jewish friends with Jewish families who had a very rich comic tradition, and a lot of Jewish humour crosses over with the humour my parents like. It's sort of family-based, it's based around sort of family cliches and stereotypes. I mean, again, that's a bit of a cliche in and of itself. And I knew that there were Indian or Asian archetypes that were really, really funny, but I didn't hear them or see them on television. I saw the same things, but from different cultures, whether they were Italian or Jewish or whatever that they were. So for me, it was really exciting, because all my Jewish friends would say, oh, that's like my mum, or that's like my dad. And I knew that suddenly we had this sort of shared experience, that we knew that they knew that in my house it was very much the same as it was in their house, and I love that. And the other thing was that weirdly, it stopped dead the idea that when I was working in comedy at that time, that I had to do Asian comedy, because as a person with Asian background, none of my influences were Asian comedy. They were all, it was Morecambe and Wise and The Good Life and whatever they were, the things that I used to watch when I was a kid. And because that show existed, suddenly it felt like there was like a release. It was as if to say, oh, you don't have to do that now, because it's been done, and it's been done brilliantly, so we're not going to look at you and keep going, so where's the Asian comedy? It just stopped, and that was great. And it was also brilliant and really funny, and it meant I could watch something with my parents and particularly watch my parents sit there and say, oh, that's really funny, that's like your Uncle so-and-so. No, it's you, that's you. You haven't, you're not realising that all these characters are you in some respect. Oh yeah, that's like your aunt. No, it's you, man. So there we go.
I'm assuming we're all roughly the same age, but Shazia, were you at school when it first came on?
How long ago was Goodness Gracious Me?
When did it start? Was it 1995?
It was first on TV in 98.
98.
Oh, yeah, I was at school then.
At school. Do you remember it, or was it?
Yeah. I remember it being really funny, and things that I could relate to, like the cellophane over the remote control and the suitcases on top of the wardrobe. And I think, for the first time, I think I saw things that I personally could relate to. And I just thought it was really funny.
No one's going to say anything negative. But obviously you were involved in it. Did you realise how important it was as a show, as well as being obviously funny? But it kind of, I think it changed the way Britain saw ethnic minorities, and also the way certain ethnic minorities see themselves.
Yeah. We didn't set out to do that. I mean, we set out to make a funny show, really, and I think after the event, or you can look back on it, and I think one of the things I'm most pleased about, proud about with regards to Goodness Gracious Me is when you meet people subsequently, particularly kids who were at school at the time, who say it was great because we could go into school and everyone was saying, oh, you know, all the white kids would come up and say that bit, and when they talked, there was a bit of Punjabi or Hindi in it.
Was it Eat My Chuddies?
Kiss My Chuddies.
Kiss My Chuddies, yeah.
And
a lot of white kids were doing that.
Yeah, and they would sort of try, and it was suddenly you had, you know, certainly when I was growing up, it wasn't very cool to be Asian, you know, and you didn't really...
Speak for yourself.
Well,
we were very cool.
I am speaking for myself, and my generation, I'm probably older than you, so I was growing up, and it wasn't like this was a hip thing, you know, people weren't, all the other kids weren't trying to be Asian and going, yeah, let's get down with you guys. You just kept it quite, you know, for me, I looked at English, I didn't really talk about it, you know, people would come back to my house and go, who's that guy? Yeah, that's my dad. what?
Should explain that you're of mixed race.
I'm half Indian, yeah. So they'd be like, oh, okay, you don't talk about it. Well, why would I talk about it to you? You know, it's not a thing. So suddenly kids were saying, well, yeah, it's great, and it's suddenly quite cool. It's quite a cool thing to be Indian or Pakistani now at school. And I thought, well, that's great, because I didn't have that, and I wished I had it, and so now at least maybe they've got it, and so that's...
Yeah, I guess it wasn't just goodness gracious me. Around the same time, we had Bendy Like Beckham, and kind of a...
Bargee on the beach.
Bargee on the beach and so on. And the question is there something intrinsically funny about British Asian culture? Because there hasn't been as many serious, dramatic hits. There's been loads of comedy hits. It seems like if there's going to be a hit, it's always funny. East is East as well, famously. Do you think there's something intrinsically funny, Shazia, to British Asian comedy? More so than other cultures, or?
No, because the Jews are hilarious. They're top of the list. The Jews are really funny.
Yeah. But the Jews and the British Asians are quite similar, right?
Yeah, but they're not the same.
Guilt, food, education, overbearing mothers.
Yeah, but they've had a history of being able to laugh at themselves, which Asian people haven't had that history of being able to laugh at themselves. That's a new thing for Asians, to be able to laugh at themselves. Some find it still very hard. But the Jews have that. Yeah. They've always had that humour. And they have a history of Jewish comedians going way back, you know, Lenny Bruce, Woody Allen, all that. We haven't had that history of Asian comedy.
Yeah, that's a good question. Are there any?
We don't have any. And on the comedy circuit now, there's still only 5 or 6 Asian comedians. So when you talk about Asian comedy, to us, there is no Asian comedy. It's just comedy and Asian people doing comedy. But there is no Asian comedy. We don't have an Asian comedy clubs, Asian comedy circuit.
Yeah.
We don't have that. It's just 5 Asian people doing stand-up comedy in white clubs.
Yeah.
About their life, but it's not Asian
Did you get
comedy.
Asians coming to see you?
But that's not about intrinsically being Asian. That's about the cycle that any immigrant community, no matter how diverse or different it is, goes through in any country they're in. You don't. If a lot of people who work, a lot of Asians in this country are of a particular age who would go in to do stand-up are the children of immigrants who've worked very hard to put their children through university and get a proper job. And comedy is not a proper job. I mean, I work in it. It's not if you've slaved in a variety of different jobs. So all immigrant communities have this thing where until you're established and until you feel confident enough for people to go and take jobs that aren't accounts as things that have solid, you know, we find the same thing when we're trying to attract people into work behind the scene, behind the camera in comedy or drama. There's a real resistance at graduate level because they think, oh, I've been, you know, my parents worked really hard, they did 2 jobs, and I've got this proper degree, I should probably do something proper with it. And we have to work really hard to get them to come and work in the media, which is considered slightly fly-by-night, a slightly, you know, ephemeral business that, you know, oh, is there a proper structure to it? Well, no, there isn't. There's no proper structure to anything in comedy. It's all just slightly random and disorganised and chaotic. And it's quite hard. There are obviously outliers, there are obviously exceptions. There are some here, and there's my colleague Talisha over there. There are obviously outliers in that, but there isn't the same mass swell. But it'll come, it'll happen. It just, I imagine that every other immigrant community into any country ever has gone through the same cycle.